Some love stories are loud, passionate, and impossible to ignore. But the most dangerous kind of love is the quiet kind. The kind that slowly changes your entire life before you even realize it's happening. Because Tom Hayward and Mary Bennet were never supposed to fall in love. She was the forgotten Bennet sister. The girl nobody truly understood. The girl constantly overshadowed by everyone around her. And he was already promised to someone else. Yet somehow, every conversation between them felt too meaningful to be accidental. Every glance lasted a little too long. Every moment together felt like something neither of them wanted to end. What makes their relationship so heartbreaking is that it never begins with dramatic passion. It begins with loneliness. Two people quietly searching for someone who finally sees them. And once you notice the way Tom looks at Mary, the way he listens to her, the way he understands her better than anyone else ever has, you realize this was never just friendship. This was the kind of love that was always inevitable. But the real question is, how did the quietest girl in the story become the one person Tom Hayward could never stop loving? Mary Bennet spent most of her life feeling invisible. In a family filled with beauty, confidence, charm, and attention, Mary was always the sister left standing in the background. While Jane was admired for her kindness and Elizabeth captivated everyone with her wit, Mary became known as the awkward one. The serious one. The sister people tolerated instead of truly understanding. And after years of hearing laughter at her expense, Mary slowly started believing that maybe she simply was not someone worth noticing. That is what makes her relationship with Tom Hayward feel so different from every other romance in the Other Bennet Sister. Because Tom does not notice Mary out of pity. He notices her because he genuinely sees something beautiful in her long before she can see it herself. And strangely enough, their story does not begin with dramatic sparks or instant attraction. It begins with something far more powerful. Comfort. The very first interactions between Tom and Mary feel soft, awkward, and incredibly natural. There are no perfect speeches. No exaggerated flirting. No attempts to impress one another. Instead, there is hesitation. Nervous laughter. Quiet curiosity. And somehow, that makes their connection feel more real than almost every other relationship in the story. When Mary first meets Tom Hayward, she is unsure of herself almost immediately. Even simple conversations seem difficult for her. She second-guesses her words. She worries about sounding foolish. She overthinks every interaction because deep down, Mary has spent years expecting rejection before people even truly know her. But Tom responds to her differently. He does not mock her seriousness. He does not grow impatient with her awkwardness. And most importantly, he listens. That small detail changes everything, because for someone like Mary Bennet, being listened to feels almost revolutionary. Most people in her life either interrupt her, dismiss her, or quietly endure her presence. But Tom speaks to her as though her thoughts actually matter. He encourages conversation instead of avoiding it. He treats her opinions with respect instead of amusement. And without even realizing it, Mary begins lowering the emotional walls she has spent years building around herself. One of the most beautiful things about Tom is that he never tries to fix Mary. He does not suddenly transform her into a different person. He does not ask her to become louder, prettier, or more charming. He simply makes her feel safe enough to become herself. That is why their relationship feels so comforting to watch. Tom sees the version of Mary that nobody else bothers to understand. The intelligent girl beneath the insecurity. The emotional girl beneath the stiffness. The deeply loving woman hidden beneath years of self-doubt. And Mary slowly starts changing around him without even noticing. For perhaps the first time in her life, she begins smiling more freely. Her conversations become warmer. Her expressions soften. Even her silences begin to feel peaceful instead of lonely. Because Tom's presence gives her something she has never truly experienced before. Emotional safety. And what makes this even more heartbreaking is that Tom himself does not fully understand what is happening yet. At first, he simply enjoys being around her. He admires her intelligence. He appreciates her honesty. He finds comfort in her calm nature. But slowly, those small moments begin meaning more than they should. A glance lingers too long. A conversation stays in his thoughts after it ends. A smile from Mary suddenly feels important. And the audience begins noticing it before the characters do. That is exactly why their romance feels so addictive. It is built on emotional intimacy long before either of them speaks about love. Most romances rely on dramatic chemistry. Tom and Mary rely on understanding. And understanding can sometimes be far more powerful. The poetry scenes especially reveal how deeply connected they are becoming emotionally. Tom encourages Mary to feel emotion instead of hiding behind intelligence alone. He challenges her gently, never cruelly. He sees how desperately she wants to connect with the world emotionally, even if she struggles to express it. For Mary, this changes everything. Because most people see her emotions as awkward, Tom sees them as meaningful. And suddenly, the girl who spent years feeling emotionally invisible becomes someone deeply understood by another person. But there is one painful problem quietly growing underneath all of this. Tom Hayward is not free. No matter how natural his connection with Mary becomes, no matter how much happier he seems around her, there is still another woman standing between them. Anne Baxter. And the moment Mary realizes this, everything changes. Because Mary Bennet is not the kind of person who believes she deserves impossible love stories. The second she understands that Tom may belong to someone else, she immediately begins pulling her feelings inward. She tries to control them before they become dangerous. She convinces herself that friendship is enough. But love does not disappear simply because it is inconvenient. In fact, sometimes silence only makes feelings stronger. The tragedy is that Tom and Mary continue growing closer even while pretending nothing is happening between them. Their conversations become more personal. Their emotional connection becomes impossible to ignore. Even the people around them begin noticing the tension neither of them wants to admit aloud. And yet both of them remain trapped by fear. Mary fears rejection. Tom fears change. And both of them fear wanting something they may never actually have. Which is exactly why every interaction between them starts carrying emotional weight. A simple conversation suddenly feels intimate. A smile feels dangerous. Even standing beside each other begins feeling emotionally overwhelming. And the closer they become, the more painful the situation turns. Because what happens when two people clearly belong together, but neither of them is brave enough to say it, and even worse, what if they realize the truth too late? The most painful part of Tom and Mary's relationship is not that they fall in love. It is that they both try desperately not to. By this point in the story, their connection has already become impossible to ignore. Every conversation between them feels layered with emotion neither of them fully understands yet. They laugh more easily together. They seek each other out in crowded rooms without even realizing it. And somehow, the smallest moments between them begin carrying the greatest emotional weight. But the closer they become, the more dangerous their feelings start to feel. Because Tom Hayward is still tied to Anne Baxter. And Mary Bennet has spent her entire life believing she should expect disappointment instead of happiness. That combination becomes emotionally devastating. Mary starts trying to create distance between herself and Tom, but the problem is that emotional closeness cannot simply be undone. Once someone truly understands you, their absence becomes impossible to ignore. And for Mary, Tom's absence suddenly feels unbearable. The quiet moments become lonelier. The conversations around her feel emptier. Even the things she once enjoyed begin losing their comfort. Because Tom did something nobody else had ever managed to do. He made Mary feel seen. And once a person experiences that kind of connection, returning to loneliness feels almost impossible. What makes their story so emotional is that Mary never behaves selfishly about her feelings. She never tries to steal Tom away. She never manipulates him emotionally. In fact, she constantly tries to suppress her own heart for the sake of doing the right thing. That is who Mary Bennet is. Even when her heart is breaking, she still worries more about hurting others than protecting herself. But love has a way of revealing truths people try hardest to hide. The more Mary denies her feelings, the more obvious they become. Especially to the audience. Every glance at Tom suddenly lasts half a second too long. Every compliment from him affects her more deeply than it should. Every moment apart quietly hurts her in ways she cannot explain aloud. And then there is Tom. Tom Hayward may appear calm on the surface, but emotionally, he is becoming just as conflicted as Mary. At first, he convinces himself that his attachment to her is simply friendship. After all, Mary is intelligent, thoughtful, and kind. Of course he enjoys speaking with her. Of course he values her company. But eventually, even he can no longer ignore the truth. Because friendship does not make your heart race when someone enters a room. Friendship does not leave you replaying conversations late at night. And friendship certainly does not make every goodbye feel strangely disappointing. The emotional tension between them becomes almost unbearable because neither of them knows how to address it honestly. Tom begins noticing details about Mary constantly. The softness in her voice when she becomes comfortable, the way her eyes light up when discussing books and poetry. The sadness she tries so hard to hide beneath politeness. And without meaning to, he starts caring about her far too deeply. That is the moment everything truly changes. Because once love becomes emotional dependency, pretending becomes impossible. One of the most heartbreaking aspects of Mary's character is that she genuinely believes another woman will always be chosen over her. That belief has existed inside her for years. She has watched prettier women admired instantly. She has watched charming women adored effortlessly. She has spent so long feeling emotionally overlooked that disappointment feels safer than hope. So even as Tom's feelings slowly become obvious, Mary struggles to believe they could possibly be real. Instead, she begins convincing herself that someone else must surely make him happier. Someone more elegant. More confident. More desirable. Someone like Anne Baxter. And this insecurity quietly destroys her. Because every warm moment with Tom is immediately followed by guilt. Every meaningful conversation becomes something she later overthinks in private. She starts guarding her heart more carefully, terrified of wanting something she may never truly have. Yet despite all this emotional restraint, Tom keeps moving closer to her. Not intentionally at first. It simply becomes natural. He searches for her in conversations. He notices when she grows quiet. He instinctively wants to comfort her sadness. And the frightening thing is that everyone around them slowly begins noticing it too. There are moments where even silence between them feels intimate. A single look suddenly says more than words ever could. And that is what makes their romance feel so mature compared to other relationships in the story. It is not built on fantasy. It is built on emotional understanding. Tom does not fall in love with an idealized version of Mary Bennet. He falls in love with the real Mary. The insecure Mary. The awkward Mary. The thoughtful and emotional Mary who hides her pain behind composure. And perhaps for the first time in her entire life, someone chooses her completely. But just when their emotional connection seems strongest, another painful misunderstanding begins pulling them apart. Mr. Writer. The possibility of Mary being connected to another man changes everything for Tom in ways he never expected. Until this moment, Tom has been emotionally confused. But the second he imagines losing Mary to someone else, his feelings suddenly become terrifyingly clear. Jealousy forces honesty out of people faster than almost anything else. Tom begins noticing how deeply unsettled he feels watching another man occupy Mary's attention. He tries to remain calm, rational, respectful. But internally, something is unraveling. Because for the first time, he realizes Mary Bennet may not always be there waiting quietly beside him. And that realization terrifies him. Meanwhile, Mary misunderstands Tom just as deeply. She believes his concern comes from politeness rather than love. She convinces herself that his future still belongs elsewhere. And because she fears humiliation more than heartbreak, she continues hiding her feelings instead of risking vulnerability. This creates one of the most emotionally frustrating parts of their relationship. They are both completely in love. And neither of them can say it. The audience can see it in every conversation. In every moment of hesitation. In every painful silence between them. But fear keeps both of them trapped. Tom fears destroying the life he thought he wanted. Mary fears hearing the words she has secretly expected her entire life, "You were never truly chosen." And sadly, sometimes the people who deserve love most are the ones least able to believe they can actually have it. But then something happens that changes the entire course of their story. Tom's relationship with Anne Baxter finally begins falling apart. And suddenly, for the first time, the impossible no longer feels impossible. But if Tom is finally free to follow his heart, why does Mary Bennet begin preparing herself to lose him forever?